Renita D'Souza has been working as a development economist, and she is fellow at Observer Research Foundation. So I thought why not to bring in a think tank perspective as well. So Dr. Renita, if I can invite you to put your views.
Thank you, Rahulji. I'd like to thank BIMTech at the outset for giving me the opportunity for expressing my views on this very important topic. I have a presentation, just like to share it.
Sure.
Okay. Is it visible?
It is coming very much.
Is the presentation visible? Yeah. So the Indian lockdown, referred to as one of the world's most stringent, did less for social distancing and flattening of the COVID-19 curve than it did for the desperation and helplessness that it brought upon the migrants of the nation. The lockdown rendered the migrants hardly any buffer resources to last the days of the lockdown. They became victims of starvation and homelessness. So adverse were the circumstances that they were forced to walk their way homes to their hometowns located several hundred kilometers away. Despite the fact that the urban migrants form the sinew and steel of the urban economy, the neglect towards their welfare has been aptly demonstrated by this pandemic. Uttar Pradesh and Bihar constitute a major share of the total out-migration circular migrants in the country. As such, one would expect that the reverse migration would also be maximum to these states. As per certain official data, about 21.69 lakh migrants have returned to Uttar Pradesh, while 10 lakh have returned to Bihar. The question that confronts the Bihar and UP governments is, how do we rehabilitate these migrants in terms of food, other forms of support, and livelihoods? So the question we need to ask is, why do people migrate from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh? The states of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh represent the middle Gangetic plains of India. This region is characterized by a large population, with Uttar Pradesh being the most populous state of the nation, followed by Bihar. The region is the level of economic and human development in these states has fallen short of the essential needs and aspirations of their rising populations. Of this vast population, only 11.3% and 22.28% resides in the urban areas in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, respectively. The unemployment rate of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh stand at 7.2% and 6.4% respectively, both greater than the national average of 6.1. These figures imply that the huge population pressure and the lack of urbanization have been responsible for the lack of employment opportunities, compelling out-migration from these states. Landlessness, seasonal nature of farming, underemployment, low wages, etc. have been the other significant drivers for out-migration. Both the agricultural and the non-agricultural sectors have shown poor expansion and development both in UP and Bihar. The state domestic product factor cost of agriculture for both Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, and the statewide number of factories and the workers working in these factories demonstrate this fact. The numbers are on your screen. Why do people, so most of the migrants from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh are located at the metros in Delhi, Maharashtra, Haryana, Punjab, Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal, and Gujarat. Most of them migrate to Delhi and Maharashtra. The kind of jobs occupying them include agricultural labor, construction work, self-employment including street vending, rickshaw pulling, security guards, etc. The positive impact of migration on family welfare includes increased remittances, increased consumption of various goods and services, including health and education. There is, of course, a positive impact of migration on the overall quality of the lives lived in rural areas. But what about the migrants themselves? They are typically part of the informal workforce. Informality implies that lower wages, irregular and uncertain wages, lack of job and social security, informal working conditions, etc. Being in the informal sector, these migrants do not even have a written job contract. Migrants are compelled to live in informal settlements such as slums. Many of them reside at work sites, open spaces, hovels, etc. Migrants should have been rightfully entitled to universal access of essential goods and services, but are deprived of the same thanks to domicile-based restrictions confronting them. Has migration really helped individuals become economically empowered citizens of the nation? One of the indicators of such economic empowerment is the ability to absorb or withstand economic shocks. The COVID-19 pandemic was one such shock. It pushed the migrants into the gulf of poverty because they did not have enough buffer resources to last the lockdown, no social protection measures to support them in the worst of economic times. Relief measures for migrants were poorly targeted. We now come to the question of how to rehabilitate these reverse migrants. There are three principles that the rehabilitation strategy must embody: support, protection, and empowerment. In the short run and medium term, migrants need to be supported and protected. In the long term, migrants need to be empowered. In the short run, they need to be provided with food supplies and cash support. Free ration of rice, wheat, pulses can be simply provided from the excess stocks of food grains available with the government that would otherwise rot in the warehouses. Under the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan package, the government has announced for migrants who are neither beneficiaries under the National Food Security Act nor under the state card a provision of 5 kg of grains and 1 kg of pulses per month for at least 3 months. Given the excess of stocks with the government, this supplementary rationale can be easily tripled. Also imperative to provide cash transfers per month for at least 3 months, totaling rupees 6,000, which is equivalent to the MNREGA wage of rupees 200 per day, as argued by the Indian Society of Labour Economics. I think this, of all the of what have been spoken by scholars and experts on the panel, this seems to be even meager than what is commensurates or sort of corresponds to the needs and requirements of the migrants. So this one could say that this is a conservative expectation. The implementation of these schemes seems questionable given the obsession of the government to identify circular migrants who do not even possess necessary documentation. These immediate interventions should not be subject to domicile-based access. For the period slightly beyond the short run, the question of unemployment needs to be answered. This is indeed a concern given unemployment and underemployment in UP and Bihar. Under the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, under the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, the scope of the MNREGA has been expanded by earmarking 40,000 crores to accommodate the returning migrants. Furthermore, the government has launched the Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana, combining 25 ongoing rural employment programs for an expenditure of about rupees 50,000 crores to generate 125 days of work for returning migrants. The impact of the Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana create new job opportunities and not displace existing workers, given that it is a consolidation of existing schemes. Generation of new employment opportunities is necessary to prevent depression of rural wages. Will those who return from cities, areas of destination, consider migrating again? Migrants have faced such neglect and humiliation as to have developed trust deficits, lack of trust on their employers and on the governments, both of whom have largely not come to their rescue in their hardships. As far as the employers are concerned, it is the informal nature of work that is to be blamed. Formal employment typically entails support necessitated by adversities. PM Modi has called for an Atmanirbhar India. Can informality driving the fate of as many as 93% of the workforce allow Atmanirbharta? The government needs to seek ways to make formal employment the reality of India. Now we come to the question of social security of migrants. If there was adequate social protection for migrants, their mass exodus would have very well been averted. The government must think about the social security needs of the migrants. There is a need to articulate a campaign for the right to basic needs of migrants irrespective of documentation. As Professor Priya Deshinkar observes, to devise appropriate welfare schemes and development strategies for circular migrants, it is very important to have reliable and nationally representative statistics. Unfortunately, the concerned authorities are not in possession of such numbers. In the medium term, it is required of authorities to map the migration profile of the nation and create knowledge and better comprehend the realities and circumstances and issues of the migrants. Finally, in the long run, both UP and Bihar need to revive industrialization, and the chosen strategy to do so can be rural development leading to in-situ urbanization. Poor governance is one of the hurdles to increase in private investment in these states. Both states are characterized by low ease of doing business. Steps need to be taken to improve the same. Given the current reality of migrants, their social mobility becomes a question. Industrialization and ensuing urbanization must address this. The Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan does involve a conversation about fast-tracking investments and measures to promote investment in the country, schemes to boost and augment, upgrade industrial infrastructure, initiatives for improving the quotient of ease of doing business, and so on. The focus of this campaign must, but logically, be on the two most populous but underdeveloped states of the nation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. If you could stop sharing, we can come to full screen now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. El, for your views. I think you brought in another perspective, although kind of summarizing some of the panel members are also talking about.